if you've just got a few pennies for seeds and a little patience, that's all you're going to need to be successful. And that's what I liked about Jim's methods, because there are some really fancy sprouting things that you can buy on the internet, but Jim is going to be telling us that you can do that, but it's not necessary to do it. So I'm glad that he kind of hinted at that as well. And that's good advice, Jim, as far as, because we were all about that broccolis, because they're very healthy. A broccoli sprout is much healthier as far as the nutrients that it provides than its adult counterpart. So a lot of people are really getting excited about it. And since that's not a beginner seed to use, it could surely discourage people and then make them just totally give up on the process, when actually, if they just would have started out with something beginner like what you're recommending, then they could learn about it some more.
Yeah, let me just interject there too. I tell people, start with the lentils or start with the mung beans, and if you decide, it's too much work, I don't want to do it. It takes 5 minutes to get a half-gallon jar, but some people that's too much work. Then go ahead and make up a pot of soup or a pot of beans out of the rest of them, and you can withdraw it with grace. You don't have this $100 sprouting thing and the $200 assortment of sprouting seeds. And what am I going to do with that? So start simple. Once you get half a dozen batches done, then you can start expanding, because each sprout has a little bit different method to it. And regardless of what somebody says, you got to do it this way or it just isn't going to work, the fact is it's going to have to be done your way or it won't work, depending on where you're living, what your house is like, the light, the humidity, the temperature, your ability to follow through on things. And you can then learn how it works for you one at a time. I strongly do recommend that. And I'm glad you caught that. It's a good question. Thanks.
Right. They're extremely healthy, and it can be very easy to do. So let's say we are total beginner and we're starting out with the mung bean or the lentil, as you recommend for a beginner. What would be a good way to start?
Well, simple way to start is I give you the quart jar. And you may be throwing them away. A lot of people throw these away. I'd much rather use this in plastic, but that's my own preference. But you can use plastic containers, and you can use these kind of jars, and they don't cost anything. You can go online, and for about $1.50, you can get a stainless steel mesh lid that'll screw on the wide mouth jars, or you don't have to. You can take some cheesecloth, or some members of our group went to the dollar store, and they got this plastic web that they use for stitching, for sewing. For sewing, and they cut those into pieces and put them in there. I've used fiberglass screen material that I bought at Home Depot. Buy a foot of it, and that's enough for about 10 years worth of sprouting, and cut it to fit in the opening of the ball jar lids that have like that, and just set it over there and screw that on. And if you don't have this, just put the screen over it, put a rubber band around it. If you don't have a rubber band, tie a piece of string around it, and you're done. So that's all you need to get started, is a jar.
Well, there's no excuse, guys, because everybody's got a jar, and most people have a rubber band.
and a pound of lentils, you're into this now for $1.50. So you can withdraw with grace, or you can succeed with honor.
I like that. Withdraw with grace or succeed with honor. There's a lot of things that could be applicable into life, but that's a good thing to bring up today. So now, what size jar was that you were showing?
Okay, this is a 1 quart ball jar. And if you're going to do it, you can get them online and pay that shipping, or go down to Walmart. I hate to tip, but anyway, they have the cheapest ones. You buy I think it's a dozen of them for maybe $10-12, and they'll come with these lids with the solid inserts. So, and that's good, because like I said, and now you're into this for $12, but if you just have a jar, you can start with that. Quart jar, I now do half-gallon jars, and I'll show you some of those in a little bit, but because I eat a lot of sprouts, and from the time I put this on to soak, I soak it overnight, and in 4 days, this will be full to the top with mung bean sprouts or lentil sprouts, and that's a lot of sprouts. but I'll eat that much in a day. So that's why I do half gallons now.
Wow. So if you would, so if you were to use that size jar, let's say, and then how much, if you were scooping out the mung beans, how much would you put in there?
I use a
About
quarter cup of mung beans to a quart
cup.
jar, half a cup to a half gallon.
Wow, that's amazing. Oh,
Yeah,
Peter,
and just don't.
Peter wants to know how much water to add to the jar. Hi, Peter.
Hi, Peter. Good question. Glad you asked. I could pour some of these in here. A quarter cup is going to be like right about here, and I would put it maybe 3 times higher. I'd put at least a cup of water in there so that they can keep soaking up water. And again, a lot of places I've seen, and there are some really great people who have the science of all these down. And if you want to really follow directions, but to start with, just be generalist. That's my theory. Is I usually do this after dinner. I'll put them in. I'll pour some water on them, and okay, so I measured out a quarter cup. I poured in a cup of water, and then I set it back behind my Berkey water filter for the night. And then the next morning I get up, I put the screen over it, and I pour the water out. I turn the jar and set it down. There's my 15 seconds of work for the day, and that's how it goes. That's sprouting right there.
Wow. So it's not an exact science. If you put a little bit more water in there, that's not going to hurt anything, just as long as it's enough to cover them and give them that moisture, then that's what's really important about it.
That's right. Look outside in the spring and look at everything sprouting, with or without water, with a lot, with a little. It's all sprouting.
Oh, wow.
Good general rule of thumb. That's for sprouts. You bet.
Yeah. So now you just do that once a day, with the water, rinsing it?
Once I have these going, and I'll put the screen lid on it. And the other reason you put a screen lid on, I don't want bugs to get in there, and but also then I don't pour the seeds out when I fill it. So I soak it overnight. The next morning I pour that out, and then I rinse it out really well. I rinse because there'll be some tannins from the seeds coloring in the water, and I rinse that out, and I just go down like that a couple or 3 times to get all the excess water. A lot of people like to get salad spinners for late. No, don't do that. But anyway, then it's on its side, and I just turn it. Let me show you what. This is some zesty sprouting mix. It's 3 days old. This was a quarter cup, which went up to about there, and this is 3 days. In 2 days, it'll be filled to the top. But after you rinse the water, you turn it like that to get as many sticking on the side, and then just set it on the counter. And I'm in the kitchen a lot during the day, so if I go by, I might pick it up and turn it a little. So if there is excess water left over, it doesn't sit in one spot all day. And you can see these now. This is day 3. See, they're already. I could eat them, but I'm kind of a pig. I like to get real big and stuff. So hopefully that answers that. So you rinse at least twice a day. If you have a really hot climate, you're going to want to do it 3 times a day. And sometimes, like for chickpeas, garbanzo beans, I will actually put them in the refrigerator at night because they'll go bad really easily. And they have for me because they got so much surface area and a big skin around that to hold the air or the water in without air. So I put them in the fridge at night, and that helps if you've got a really, really hot climate.
That's a good tip, because I think that may be what is a stumbling block for some people in the warmer climates, at least. So it's just like you go to bed at night and you put them to bed at night too, and then you're not going to forget about them because you wake up in the morning and you open up the refrigerator. So
well, exactly, and I've left them in for a day or so, and it's fine because in the spring things sprout, and if you live in a cold climate, there'll be stuff coming up, and it gets cold that night, and the next morning they're still alive. So they'll grow in the refrigerator, which is weird because, like, hey, I ate a bunch of sprouts, but the jar's still full. It keeps on giving. Yeah.
I'm glad that you're talking about this too, because there are some people because you have adopted the plant-based lifestyle as well as I have. And there's some people that'll say it's so expensive, especially if you want greens. and people know the beans are inexpensive, but they don't think about that they can produce the greens, right?
Exactly. I mean, and you can buy, hard red wheat for 49 cents a pound for organic at most large grocery stores. And if you like wheatgrass juice, And people always, they want to go get a big flat of that, by the way. And if you're going to start doing wheat, it's cheap and easy, but you don't need a lot. I mean, like a thimbleful in a glass of juice is about all my throat can take. And if you've never done it, make sure you start small. So throw that in there while we're at it.
Yeah, we should talk about that in a little while as far as the wheatgrass, because I think there are people that are interested to know about wheatgrass too, because that was and still is considered to be a superfood. And boy, when you try to purchase that wheatgrass or wheatgrass shots or whatever, you're like, you're charging me how much for this little? Oh my goodness, there has to be a better way, and you have found it. So I'm really glad you're sharing this. And you also have shared that you have traveled quite a bit on a boat and so forth. So this isn't something that you need a fancy setup to do, or a big house, or whatever. You can do it in a confined place, and right?
Yeah, I've done it on small 22-foot sailboats in the Sea of Cortez in Mexico for 4, 5, 6 months at a time. When in those days down there, you couldn't find fresh greens even when you went into the little towns. But they all had bags of lentils for about $1. So we would go out to the islands for a month, and I'd just grow up a bunch of sprouts, and that just augmented everything and made it great. So yes, absolutely. If you're backpacking, I use the nylon, they're sort of a net bag that I use for when I make my soy milk or my soy yogurt from scratch. But I use those for growing sprouts, and I can hang them from a backpack or hang them from my steering wheel on my bicycle when we're traveling that way. And then also, I can use jars on my sailboat and just lay them in the sink, wrapped in a towel, so they don't bang around when the boat's moving. And traveling by car, I just went to the West Coast and back, and in my pickup, but it's the same sort of thing. I just took jars and had them rolled up in the back seat. So I got fresh sprouts all the time. It takes 3 to 5 days from the time you start making them to the time you harvest them, and a minute or two of work a day. So you can do it in any environment, and they're fine with it.
This is such a wonderful tip. So often I'll hear people who have adopted this lifestyle say, I'm going camping, or I'm hiking, or I'm going on an airplane, and especially if they're traveling internationally, and I'm restricted about as far as what I can bring with me on the airplane, as far as produce and things like that. So here you just these are just wonderful pearls of wisdom that you just shared with us, because almost wherever you go, you can sprout things, and you don't need that many materials, and it's not going to be too cumbersome, and you can just do it. And some of the things you can wait until you get to your destination to purchase. So that's really awesome. So
can I add I'm going to add a caveat to that. One of our members, very active, lives in Mexico. And she was flying back, and they said, you can't take these seeds across the border. They wouldn't let her fly in with her seeds. So check that before you fly, just as a heads up. It may or may not work.
Right. But you might be able to bring beans, but not seeds. Right?
Exactly. Black-eyed peas, my favorite all-time sprout, but they're hard to grow because they like to mess up too, but I like them very much.
Well, surely if we can all be accidental gardeners with the weeds that we find along the ways, then we can surely figure this out, because nature is a powerful force, and if we just get out of the way, it'll definitely do it. Go ahead.
I'm glad you said that term, accidental gardeners. If you go to our Facebook group or and search for accidental gardening, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago, I got that. Why am I throwing out all these when I rinse them out at the end, and I have extra seeds that didn't sprout in hulls and maybe a few sprouts? I took to throwing them in the raised bed garden in the backyard, and I got pictures of this. It's 15 by 6 feet, just overgrown with all kinds of cruciferous vegetables, all kinds of greens, and just everywhere and thick, because all year long I'm throwing out what normally you throw out. I throw in there, and a lot of that stuff, it's sprouting and it grows. So yeah, so the accidental garden is the second life for your sprouts. So just want to throw that in there.
That's a good phrase to remember. And I think about some gardeners, especially beginners, where they get their little seedlings set up, and they're watering them every day and watching them starting to sprout, and maybe sometimes they're failing, and they're just just minding them, day by day, hurrying them along in their mind and hoping that they don't fail, and maybe even planting them, and then they might fail after that. And here you just kind of did a Jack of the Beanstalk thing.
Exactly. Yeah.
And you just got all these, that's fantastic. So
you got the picture, and a lot of
enough.
other members are doing that now. And one member on our Zoom meeting, she showed a picture. She said, and it was a picture. This is outside my back door, and you can see the steps. And she said, "Oh, it was too cold out, so I just threw it on the bare earth right by the back steps. And up there's all these cruciferous vegetables that are like this tall." I didn't think it was going to work. So yeah.
Wow. So that's a good thing to know about. And even if you don't have a backyard, if you just had a small pot or something, and you could just kind of throw things in there and see what happens too, because nature just wants to do its thing. So
if you have a neighbor with a vegetable garden, you can throw them in there when they're not looking, and they're going to wonder, how come the broccoli is growing? Where'd that come from? This is a side note, fun.
Look at all these volunteers. So I wanted to kind of, if you can help guide me, because I wanted to start off for beginners. So where are we now in the beginner section of our broadcasts? We were talking about that the best thing to do is to pick like a mung bean and so forth. So what should we say next?
Okay. So we got a jar. You put it, and however you want to cover it is fine. We got that much figured out. Then you measure out. Start with lentils, mung beans if you got them. They both grow very quickly. Day 2, you can start eating them when you see little nubs on them. And anyway, so you're going to fill it. You're going to soak it overnight. When you get up in the morning, when you see it, empty it. You don't have to watch the clock, and then roll it and leave it alone. And twice a day, add some water, swirl it, rinse it. You don't have to let it sit after that first soaking, and keep going. Okay, so then starting the second day, if you're just getting started, take a couple out and put them in your mouth and try them, and just, okay, that's what that tastes like, because most people have never seen them growing, and a lot of time, I mean, every day a new person comes in and goes, "Are these all right? They look kind of funny." And so it's like, yeah, no, just try them. Try them on day 2, try them on day 3, try them on day 4. And then and at some point you start to understand this is how far I want them to grow before I eat them, because everybody has a different concept of what's going to be good. So generally with mung beans, you're going to, on the 3rd day of sprouting, so you soaked it, and then you go 3 days, and they're going to be ready to harvest, and they're going to be delicious. They'll be wonderful, and put them on everything. And the same with lentils. The zesty sprouting mix may take a day longer. I'm bad. I like, well, when the jar is so full, it's going to get hard to get them out. That's when I take them out, because I want more. So that's the whole process right there. Except that way I do it, and what I put this in my book, which is really kind of, is just kind of, I'm beating people to death with the simplicity of it. But as soon as I harvest that, I wash that jar out really well. I put some more in and put them on to soak. Boom. And that's where a lot of people leave off. It's like, oh, here, I made a batch of sprouts. No, you want ongoing sprouts. So as soon as you harvest one, start another. And if you do that, before you know it, you're going to have, every day you got plenty of sprouts to eat.
I'm glad you mentioned your book, because you had said that you wrote that basically for your family, and they thought it was so fabulous, they thought you should publish it. So I do have a link to your book in the notes. So if people are interested in learning more about what you're sharing today, then that's an option for them as well. Okay, so we kind of did the beginner thing. So let's go to, now that we feel like, okay, we did the beans and they taste okay, and I think I got this, and now you want to go to maybe the next level. What would you recommend?
Okay, well, it's really by choice. I mean, I want to talk about sunflower seeds, but at some point, but today, but we can go ahead and go with broccoli. And with cruciferous, I use a cruciferous blend that I bought for specifically to be grown for microgreens. And I'll still sprout them. They sprout and they eat them, and I grow them with microgreens too. So they'll say you want to do the broccoli. There's two things you can do. There's a number of things you can do to help keep them from going bad. But first, let me tell you about the ones that aren't bad. A lot of sprouts, they have these very micro fine cilia on their roots. And every day somebody comes in and goes, "Oh my gosh, I think these are moldy. Look at them." And then they smell a little funky. And said, well, and we always, and our group has been so patient. Everybody was brought up the same way. And we go, "Well, is it smell kind of broccoli-like?" And they go, "Yeah." "Is it slimy?" "No." "Okay. Spray some water on that. Does that white stuff go away?" "Yes." "Then that's just normal cilia. Then that's just fine." "Really?" "Yeah, it is. Eat a couple of them." "Oh, hey, they taste like broccoli." "Okay, good." So differentiating, you have to learn what's really bad or what you think is bad. We had people who've thrown out lots of batches and they come frustrated. "You got to eat those." And next time you throw them out, throw them in your garden anyway, because a bunch will still grow. But that's the big thing. There's two other things. There are some things you can do to your rinse water once a day to help keep them from going off. I use food grade. I knew I was going to forget what it is. Anyway, okay, we can use vinegar. We use apple cider vinegar, or I've lost the word.
It'll come. So let's just say you would use vinegar and apple cider vinegar. What do you mean by that?
I put like a teaspoon apple cider vinegar in a quart jar and mix that up real good, and then just pour maybe a quarter of that in and do a rinse once a day with that. Okay, and let it sit for about a minute, and then go ahead and pour it out. And you can leave it, or you can rinse it with fresh water afterwards. But that helps to get rid of a lot of the kind of stuff that might want to bloom up in a seed like that. So if you do that, and also the food grade hydrogen peroxide, there's a food grade, and you can do the same sort of mix with that. We'll do the same thing. The other thing is I'm a real generalist about, I got my sprouts, they're growing. This is day 2 on these lentils. I'll show them off a little bit if I can. I'll probably drip water in my computer. It'll blow up, and then see those? Those are pretty good.
Yeah.
I'm eating like a pig.
You could like sit and watch a movie and just kind of.
I do. I pour a jar of these out. Yeah, it beats popcorn any day. But with broccoli, especially, and the other cruciferous vegetables, and chickpeas and black-eyed peas, I think it really helps to make sure they're really well drained. I turn it over and I gently go down with it. I don't do any sharp moves. I don't want to break the sprouts, but and nothing else is dripping. And what a lot of people in our group, they have little stands that they buy, which you can make. You can use a dish strainer and just let it sit there for a half an hour or so. The other thing is, if you're growing broccoli, half a dozen times a day, how hard is it to just walk by and just go like that and set it back down? Just keep doing that, and that way the water isn't standing anywhere. Make sure there's good ventilation, and that should get you good. That should make them work fine. That's all I can think of right now. I'm sure that half the people in my group are going, "No, Jim, you didn't tell them this." But
I think that I normally wait to the end for questions, but we're getting a lot of questions. So I think we're going to, or comments, and maybe they wanted, like you said, "No, Jim, tell them this." So we're going to let them out so they can kind of participate. So let's see what we have. Jacqueline. Hi, Jacqueline. What is better, growing in jars or on flats with dirt? I need to rinse off microgreens if I grow them myself.
Well, the answer is yes. It's all good. I will tell you this: do not set your microgreens outside to sun and grow, because squirrels and birds like them also, and they'll come and finish them off for you. I don't usually use dirt inside because it can get messy, and I use for example, I'll use the one that I've lost now. This is a
I should be doing a drum roll right now, guys, because this is an awesome, you got to pay attention to this awesome invention that Jim is going to share with us.
And any takeaway food thing container that, see, you can see there's a dip in the lid. A lot of them, the lid comes up and goes over. In that case, turn it over. But I took the lid and I right before the show, and I just made a slice with my razor knife. Do not do this without adult supervision, or use children's scissors or whatever we got to say, because I don't want to get sued, and I'm sure they don't either. But then I put 2 paper towels in there, and so they go across the top. That's it. All right. So now then I got this, and I'll probably fill it 2/3 of the way with water, and I'll set this in. And they'll see those 2 towels hanging down there in the bottom, over here and over here. They will act as a wick, and the water will come up here really slowly. Now I can grow any microgreen I want. Very simply, no dirt, no. They sell core mats and plastic mats and different things, but this is, and you can get unbleached paper towels for those that are really chemically sensitive. So this is a really easy way to grow chia seeds. I'll just, and I don't pre-soak them. I just lay them. Once this is wet, I spread them out on this, spread them out on the surface here. And then in like, it takes about 5 or 6 days, because I want them to get nice and tall. I have this little forest of chia. And you can, once it's wet, you can actually spread them out. You can spread them out in a heart shape, like you mentioned earlier, and any kind of shape you want, and they're just going to grow up. And that's the best medium I have for really small seeds. And I'll do sunflower seeds that way. But what happens is sometimes they don't have a lot of grip, so I put them real thick, and then they stand up together. When you get done, you take this off, you turn it sideways, and take scissors and just go along and cut them off and let them fall into a plate, and you harvest them, and they're in a jar. And so you can do it with just about anything, any takeaway dish by and large. If it's food grade and you can stand it. Some people don't want any plastic. These they used to sell for $1 a piece. That was with shipping from China. Now they're like $10 each or something. But it's simply a grate with a pan. These look like old school lunch trays. If you got those, just put some paper towels in there. But if you got this, you can put your bigger beans on here and just put some water down there and where it's touching that, and they'll grow there, and the roots have something to hold on to. And that's the medium I would use. If it's smaller seeds, see, these holes are kind of big. So I'll lay a paper towel on here. I learned this from my group. That's a great. Lay a paper towel on there, put the smaller seeds on. The roots will take hold. They got plenty of water coming up, and they'll get, however high you want them to get before you harvest them. So medium is not that important. I'll tell you, I don't use these much anymore, and I end up giving them. I take them as party favors when I used to go to a monthly whole food plant-based group potluck, and I would always take a bunch of them all set up and so forth. So, but now by and large, I just use the jars because it's glass and it's a lot better for me, I think. But I still I do have what are called 10-20 trays in the gardening world. That's those long black trays. They're about 10 inches by 20 inches, or I'm not sure why they're called that.
Those are the trays that when you buy a small plant, it's like a flat. Is that what that?
Yes,
like
exactly. It's called a flat. And I have different size inserts, but I'll also use them and just put an inch of dirt in there sometimes to grow the sunflowers, because I like them better that way. But like I said, it does make a bit of a mess. And then if you grow that many, you got to eat them, and so it's like, well, I like them, I love them, but I'm not going to eat that whole flat. So I do use these a lot though now, since it is food grade. And like I said, I have 4 large bags of these out in the garage that I haven't even made into it, but I just saved it. I don't throw it away, And if somebody's new and in the area, I give them one. But this will grow a lot of food and with no work. I hope that answered your question.
That's great. If anybody has children or grandchildren, this would be a fun project to do, to introduce gardening to them and for them to be successful and also be resourceful. So that's a really great suggestion. Let's see what our next. Jacqueline, do I need to rinse off my greens before I eat them?
Well, as a matter of practice, when I harvest them, I give them a rinse and I shake them really well, and I refrigerate them unless I'm eating them right then. So I would just as a matter of practice, because I'm using scissors to cut them, and I'm usually doing it over the sink. So yeah, if you don't have the rinse water, I wouldn't worry about it, because when I went to whole food plant-based, or started to before I could find information on it, but I was doing sprouts, and I thought, somebody said, "Oh, those will kill you. They're dangerous. You can get whatever." And I looked it up on morbidity and mortality at the CDC 20 years ago, and I mean, I've been doing this for over 40 years, but I looked it up, and it was in the 90s, and I said, how many people have died from eating sprouts? And there were none. There were a couple of bad cases of whatever you get if you don't get them right, and those were probably from commercial. But in the same 20 years, 65 million Americans have died from the American industrial food plant. So it's like, you're probably pretty safe either way. It depends on your cleanliness level. So.
Very good point. Okay, let's see our next question. Debbie Larda Weston. Thank you for sharing your sprouting knowledge. How many days do you do the process, please?
Oh, what a great dog in that picture. That's beautiful. Okay, I do it till I can't stand it anymore. With microgreens, these will grow, and then they'll just kind of stop because it's just water. And I do have a sort of an organic nutrient base that I use. I got from Mike Van Doozy on Keep On Growing, that I use for hydroponic kind of stuff. But you can add that, and they'll grow some more. But generally speaking, with seeds, you're looking at maybe 5 or sometimes 6 days, depending on how long it takes for them to sprout. If you're buying seeds made for sprouting, then they generally do come out quicker and grow up. But the beans like mung beans and lentils, once you put them on here, if you're going to grow them as microgreens, and it's a whole different plant, by the way, than when I'm growing these lentils here. These will be grown as a microgreen. They haven't been growing. They'll all be growing up like little trees, all side by side. And I'll wait till they have like 3 sets of leaves on them. They're about 6 inches long, and I cut them off. And then I'll dice them up. And you see lots of pictures on our site about that. And it's a whole different food than just the sprout. In the sprout, you get the roots too, and you get it a little bit smaller. So a little bit longer this way, a couple, 3 days. But it's, again, a whole different food from the same thing. You get 2 great foods from 1 seed. Hope that helps. But again, also taste them every day after the second day, and so you get an idea. Well, I like that. Well, I like that. Well, and sometimes I've had it where it was almost empty come day it was time to harvest, because like when you run out of them, you have to get in a hurry.
Well, that's a great thing about this lifestyle is you can do taste testing and not worry about cross-contamination. And I suppose just like when we buy our leafy greens and we'll have like baby spinach versus a more mature spinach, you're going to have a different flavor profile. So that's a really good suggestion so that we can know at what stage we prefer depending on our individual tastes. Let's see if we have another question. Trish, what is the best, easiest way to grow sunflower seed microgreens? I bet you hear that question a lot.
Oh, it's the holy grail. It took me forever. I've fed a lot of birds a lot of microgreens over the years trying to get this right. But okay, some people in our group, there are people who will tell you growing them in a jar is great. And some of them will sprout. You can buy the seeds hulled in bulk, organic, raw at large grocery stores. So you don't have to order online for $12 a pound. You can get them for, like $2.50 a pound or so, organic. And when I do that, though, I'll lay them out in a tray and I'll separate the broken ones. Although half the broken ones have the germ and they will sprout, I just want to only put the whole ones in there. That's labor intensive. It might take me 20 minutes to get enough to make a decent batch. So if I'm doing that and I do it in here, but I don't care for this is my personal thing. Other people love this, so you got to try both. But if you sprout them this way in here, then when they sprouted, they're all intertangled with one another, and the root is included. And I don't care for the root. To me, the root has a bitter flavor, and I just prefer the shoot and the leaves. But some people, like I said, swear by it. So then I grow them I'll grow them on our very expensive sprouter here, the self-tending microgreen sprouter. And I wait until they get really long because I like lots of stuff. And then I can cut them off and leave it out, or I can cut them all off and put them in a jar. So well, I don't remember the question now. Oh, best way to grow. So I'll soak the seeds And it's funny, we have a guy who's been sprouting like 5 or 10 years longer than me, and he's really got some great stuff. He did a whole hour last week in our group. And he's saying just to soak them for the 6 hours or 8 hours. I still say I soak them overnight because I want when they have the hull, I want the water to get in there. And guess what? Both ways work. But if you want to pre-soak them if you're doing microgreens, because otherwise it'll take a while for them to draw up the water and start to grow.
So about how tall would they be when, Jim, how tall would those sunflowers be when you're ready to cut them?
Well, if I have when they first come up, they get these 2 little oval leaves, one on each side. And then when you see in the middle another leaf about to emerge out, more plant coming out, that's when they're ready to harvest, by and large, on the microgreens. Okay. So now when most people, when they're growing microgreens and sprouts, so there's one myth I want to debunk. And when I first got into sprouting, we're talking in the mid 80s, all the books, and Janet Wigmore, or Ann Wigmore, I'm sorry, Ann Wigmore, she would say, put them under the sink, and I would open up the sink and I'm like, oh my God, this is nasty under here, so I'd find another cabinet that wasn't quite so nasty. And lo and behold, 6 months later, I'd be looking for something and I'd open it up and there was this dried up tray of sprouts that had gotten really nasty and then dried. Oh no. And so every year I got about 3 or 4 batches grown, and I lost 3 or 4 batches. So then I said, forget it. I'm going to just grow it out on the countertop. Boom. And guess what? They grew, and I didn't forget them. So that's why I say leave them on the countertop. Now, if you're going to grow them as microgreens, and a lot of people say cover them for the first 3 days. And I've tried this, and it works. It also works both ways. But if you cover it but it's still on the counter, so you don't lose track of it, then that supposedly helps it sprout better and be a stronger, bigger plant. And also, people will once the sprouts are in here and they're starting to grow, they'll set this on here and they'll put a weight on here like a brick, and they'll let it sit covered for 3 days, and that helps to make the fatter sprouts, especially like with the mung beans and the sunflowers. But I don't want to bring a brick in the kitchen, and I will cover them. I've done the weighting, and I think it all works. So whatever you want to do, you get to do. Did that answer the question, do you think?
I think so. Okay,
good.
Let's get to our next one. Robert Shine, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Is reverse osmosis a better source for water?
I don't know. I use Berkey water just because it's very portable. I can take it on the boat, in the motorhome, traveling and so forth. But
can you spell that? Berkey?
Yes.
Is that a water filtration system that you have or something?
Berkey. And they're out of England, and they're large stainless nesting canisters, and they have ceramic filters on top, and then they have filters for all the other hydrocarbons and really nasty stuff that go underneath. And so they really knock out a whole lot of water. They started making these in the 1800s, I think, or early 1900s, and they're pricey. And I have a hint for that, by the way. And but they're well worth it because it just works gravity feed, and it's very simple to do. So my hack for that is get yourself a Craigslist account and set up a notification search for Berkey. And so that means that when somebody lists something called a Berkey, you'll get an email. Now there's a company called Berkey that made antiques. So you get some antique notices, but you'll get a Berkey notice, and sometimes it's like 10 cents on the dollar. And the one I have now, I bought 3 years ago for, I think, $35, and it's a $300 one. So they last forever. The filters are good for me, and I think 3 years. I'm just coming to where I have to change them out. So, but RO water, fine. I mean, it's all good as long as it's getting rid of the bad stuff, I think. Here I'm eating organic foods and good foods, but bad water.
We could probably do another broadcast with you just about how to find things that are inexpensive or free and live your life. Along the way, you seem to have found a lot of good tips for doing that.
Yeah.
And that's
One,
great.
one of my other books is Champagne Boating on a Beer Budget. Exactly
Yeah, we
that
have a
thing.
link.
So,
We have a
yeah,
link
yeah.
to that book in the notes too, because
Yeah.
I thought that was such a cool title. Okay, what's our next? Stacy Billiard, what about the Victoria system of stacked trays for sprouting?
I don't know that particular one, but I'm assuming that they have stacked trays like these, that one sits on top of another, and I think those are great. I used them for a lot of smaller ones. I didn't use these, but I used smaller ones cruising even. I'd put them in a net bag and hang them in the cabin and run a bungee cord down and tie it down so it wouldn't flop around in the motorhome or in the boat. But what's nice about them is you can grow 3 or 4 kinds in a small area. Just pour a cup of water in a couple times a day. It slowly goes through the 3 different layers of seeds, so you got 3 different sprouts growing. And then take the bottom tray, which doesn't have seeds, pour the water out, and you're done. They come in plastic, they come in stainless steel, and they come in clay.
Terracotta? Yeah.
Terracotta. Thank you.
Mhm.
And if you're getting terracotta, of course, make sure it's food grade. That there's no lead and stuff.
That's It's a shame that we have to think about those things, but that we can't just assume that what we're getting is food grade, even though it's
Right.
designed to grow food. Okay, our next question. Trish, is soil better for sunflower seed microgreen sprouting?
I probably had 10 or 20 years. That's all I used, because I didn't have these kind of sprouters to work with. But now I'd say 6 of one, half dozen of the other, because now if you're going to grow them as microgreens, you want it to hold on to something. So I would give it something like this, and that way you don't have to worry about getting a mess on the kitchen counter or the dog or cat jumping up on it and digging in it or anything like that. And when you go to harvest it, it's just not quite as messy. So, but some people swear by, and that's all they do. And you can put a screen tent on a table and put it outside if you want. And when you have dirt, and then nature will take its course with it too. So the answer is, yeah, either way it's fine.
I suppose you're limited as to how many times you can reuse the same soil if you're using the soil.
I don't know.
method.
I mean, I compost, so when I harvest that, I'll take those mats and we had some of the best sunflowers in our yard, and we just moved 6 months ago, so I don't have any growing yet. But I would tear the mats into pieces like that and stick them out in the flower beds, and then boom, all of a sudden you got all these big sunflowers, which then gives you more sunflowers to sprout, and they're organic. But okay, yeah, that's the answer.
That's a good. Well, see, and that's people that are going out and buying these little grow mats and spending so much money on these grow mats that have, pennies worth of seeds on them. You can make your own grow mat. Okay, that's our next. Jen H, how do you know when to put the sprouts near the sunlight?
Great question, Jen, and I can't say this enough. I keep my sprouts in the darkest part of the kitchen, which is not real dark in terms of the counter. Actually, they sit behind my Berkey, which is tall and blocks light, and they just lay back there. They're out of the way, and B, they don't have direct sunlight. And generally, and they can be out in the regular room, but not in direct sunlight, and not in really a large amount of indirect sunlight, just because you want to get the sprouting process going and just save the greening up for what I call harvesting. Because when you get done, and maybe this is the time to talk about harvesting, because on the last day, what I'll do is I get up in the morning, I rinse it and turn it, drain it, and then I'll set it out on our dining room table, which is by a big window with lots of indirect light. I'll turn that a couple of times in the day, and they just turn nice and green, and that's that. So. And we'll go, and then you harvest. So we'll talk about that too in a little bit, maybe.
Okay. I think we have time for one more question. We've had a lot of questions out there. So let's see. Lisa R, I'm new to sprouting. I only sprout chickpeas, but recently my batches started to smell bad, kind of fermented, and feels somehow sticky. Are they still good to use, or shall I toss them?
Okay, there's some people in our group would say rinse them off. If they're not sticky, go ahead and eat them, but I won't. If you have chickens, give them to the chickens, or go out and plant them in the garden, because they could still give you viable plants. And even the chickpeas you buy in the store, they will give you more chickpeas when they grow. But that's where rinsing them every day with some either food grade peroxide or apple cider vinegar, all diluted down with water, will help keep that from happening. The other thing, I had for 20 years, I didn't grow chickpeas, and our group, everybody else is going, well, I got chickpeas, they're just fine, Jim, what's wrong with you? I said, well, tell me what you're doing. And that's when I found out they were adding these things to the water once a day. And the second was putting them in the fridge. And that did it for me, I think. I think they have such a big skin. If you ever, I make a lot of chickpeas up in whole food plant-based diet, of course, and hummus especially. I love hummus. But they have a very large skin, and those skins are on there while they're sprouting, and the water is up inside there, and that's where the mold will start to grow. So getting something antibacterial that's still fairly healthy. And that other one hadn't come back to me. It's a whole food one, but we'll get there eventually. That's what you need to do. Oh,
There's
and
the
don't grow a whole lot of them in a bunch. You want to be able to spread them out really well so they have plenty of air circulating around them. I forgot to tell you that too.
Okay, so maybe that the chickpeas would be better not to do in a jar, maybe better to do in one of the things that you showed us where you could lay it out flat, at least in the beginning until you figured it out. But that's such a great tip. And I've not heard anybody talk about the food grade peroxide or the vinegar to keep it rinsed, because I think you may have just saved so many people who thought that they couldn't grow these things. So that's a really great tip. We had so many questions, and I encourage you guys to visit Jim's Facebook group, because they answer a lot of questions there, and that's the Beginner's Guide to Growing Sprouts. And I'm so glad that everybody was participating today. I learned a lot, and I've been trying to learn, so I even learned more today, and that's really great. So is there something that you would like to tell our audience before we sign off?
Well, just hang in there. Like I said, I really believe in starting simple and keeping it simple, and you're more likely to be successful. The other is, when you finish a batch, start a batch. I think I would start a batch, I would harvest them, and then a month later, I think, I gotta grow some more. But if you start that rotation going, then you have it as a constant supply. And I mean, this is a money-making operation, because you can eat $50 worth of sprouts in a week easily, but it only costs you about maybe 45 cents to grow them and about 20 minutes of work. So I really believe that the effort's worth it. The second is our group. I started like 5 years ago, and very few people got into this, but with the pandemic and food supply getting difficult for people, especially whole food plant-based, we've seen this deluge of people from literally all around the planet. And the whole idea is to help everybody get some food security. And if I got a tray or two of microgreens growing and a couple of jars of sprouts growing, and I continue to rotate that, I've got fresh whole food. And these plants, when they're just sprouting out and when they're just microgreens, they have everything that a plant needs to live. And we're getting all that nutrition right into us. And there's so many ways to eat them too, by the way. We didn't even get into that, but I put them on, once I harvest a pizza. When I have a pizza, which is like 3 times in the last year and a half, but I'll cover the top of it with lots of different sprouts. It'll have like this much sprouts on top. And you can cook them, you can grind them up and make veggie burgers out of them. I can eat them as a side dish. Any way you would eat beans or any other kind of seeds, I recommend it. So that's what I got.
Yeah, I have the broccoli sprouts in my green smoothie each morning, because I'm not a real fan about how they taste. So they get blended up in the blender, and I just have them that way. But that's really a lot of good advice. And again, in the notes below, you can see the links to all of Jim's books, including his book about learning how to sprout. There's a link there. So if you wanted to get more detailed information, that's another resource for you. And I also wanted to let you guys know on this coming up soon kind of thing is that I'm going to ask Jim to come back, because as much knowledge as he shared with us just about microgreens and sprouting, he has a really great story to tell about his journey in becoming plant-based. And I think that it's something that you guys are going to want to hear, because it's going to give you a lot of good tips, because he gives, Charles Deschler says, I know Jim from the boat world. I didn't know he was WFPB, which means that Charles knows what WFPB means. So now you guys are going to have to talk about that.
All right, man.
Okay. Well, thank you. Oh, Trish says, thank you, Amy and Jim. This was fabulous. And yes, it was. I love getting wisdom from people that know what to do, and especially when they have great tips like Jim shared with us. So thank you, Jim, for sharing. I'm looking forward to having you back on our show so that you can tell us about your plant-based journey of healing. And I want you guys to stay tuned for a special announcement. But I also wanted to thank Rebecca from PKA Solves. She has been in the background engineering hi, Rebecca. She's been engineering everything, clicking on it, all the questions and the camera angles, so that I was able to just enjoy my time with you, Jim, and with you guys in the audience. And I also wanted to thank Jess from justhotvoice.com. She did the countdown and all the intros and the coming up soons and so forth. But most of all, I want to thank you guys in the audience. You're getting, the best part was Jim talking about food security. You're getting all these, I just read a comment, great comments. You're participating. This is what we need, guys, because whether you're whole food plant-based or you're just about sprouting and gardening, we need to tell the world about this way of eating, because it's important for our health. It's important for our earth. And it's important to me to get this information out to you. And until I see you guys next time, and please type in the comments below along with me and Jim as we sign off and say, be strong, be well, and be green. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Jim.
Coming up next, Be Green with Amy welcomes back Thomas Allen from California Balsamic. Please join us for a recipe demo and Q&A on Wednesday, May 12th, 4 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Pacific on Be Green with Amy Live.